Good evening, Exiles. Ervin here, and welcome to my guide on everything there is to know about Delirium. Just like I did with the Breach mechanic, we're going to be starting off with the basic information first and progressively working towards more advanced topics and optimizations that you can then apply to your game to farm more efficiently, more enjoyably, and most importantly, you'll hopefully be generating more currency for your account by utilizing Delirium going forward. If I fail to help you do this and don't manage to teach you anything by the end of this video, I want you to dislike the video so it'll motivate me to do a better job in the future. But should I manage to teach you something new or improve your Path of Exile 2 experience, throw the video a like and potentially sub to the channel for more guides in the future. In the interest of respecting your time, this guide will also have many helpful timestamps below for your viewing convenience, so you can skip around to whatever segment seems likely to be the most useful for you based on your current knowledge of the game. With the introductions out of the way, though, on with the guide. First, let's talk about what Delirium is. Delirium is one of the 4 current endgame league mechanics currently available in the early access launch of Path of Exile 2, returning from the first game. This mechanic can be interacted with in one of 2 ways on your endgame Atlas map. The first and most obvious is through the Delirium Mirror mechanic available on random nodes throughout the map. After inserting your Waystone and entering a map containing a Delirium Mirror, you'll be greeted by it near the entrance. After passing through the mirror, a ring of fog will begin to expand outward relatively rapidly from your position in a similar fashion to Breach, but much less obvious. Within this expanding fog, Delirium demons will begin spawning into your map as additional enemies on top of the ones that would ordinarily be found on the map. In addition to this, there will be broken shards of glass and fractured delirium mirrors spread throughout the area. As soon as your character comes into contact with these fragments, a pack of delirium demons swarms your immediate area while being initially invulnerable to attacks until they get into position. So plan accordingly before popping these open. After activating the mirror, a initially invisible countdown will begin. Every time you activate a mirror shard, this timer extends or freezes, but should it reach 0, the delirium fog will fade, ending your encounter early. If you push too fast across the landscape of the map, you'll also outpace the expanding ring of fog, ending the encounter as well. So to get the most out of the mechanic, you need to be covering as much distance as possible, popping all of the mirrors, and defeating all the delirium demons you can within the time limit while covering the greatest surface area possible while the ring of fog expands outward, but not too quickly. So this mechanic is sounding an awful lot like a less exciting, more confusing Breach, but what can we get out of participating in this mechanic? Every monster you slay within the fog of the mirror contributes to a stacking reward visible next to your life gauge. Delirium demons are worth more contribution than ordinary enemies, and typically a good map will allow you to get between 4 and 6 reward tiers. For each reward tier, another random distilled emotion will drop where the delirium encounter ends, whether that be through timeout or due to being ended early upon pressing the button located next to your mana gauge. These emotions have 2 different functions. The first is called Anointment. When holding Alt on the passive tree and hovering over any notable, you'll notice there is a list of 3 distilled emotions on each notable in the tree. By right-clicking the emotions in our inventory and inserting them into the instilling window following the order provided in the passive tree, we can prepare an anointment. Following this, inserting an amulet into the instilling window will allow you to instill the anointment within your amulet, granting you the notable from the passive tree as long as you wear the amulet, regardless of whether your passive tree connects to the notable or not, while costing you 0 passive points. This allows you to cherry pick some of the most powerful notables in the game, no matter where they are in the passive tree for your build, further expanding the complexity of the metagame. Although keep in mind, normal amulets can only have 1 anointment at a time. It's also good to know that you can change this anointment later, and this amulet is not stuck with anything you anoint onto it permanently in case you change your mind later. More powerful notables also cost more rarely acquired emotions to anoint, meaning you'll typically want to anoint less powerful, cheaper notables into your amulet when you plan to replace the piece later on, while saving powerful, expensive anointments for the amulet you virtually never plan to replace on the character. And all of that is just one of the things we can do with Distilled Emotions. The other is instilling our maps with layers of delirium. Distilling emotions into maps instead of amulets induces them with layers of delirium. Every map can receive up to 3 emotions, and they may be the same ones if desired. Distilled Ire will instill your maps with 20% increased magic monsters and make the players 7% delirious each. Guilt instills the map with 8% increased enemy pack size and makes all players 9% delirious. Greed increases the rarity of items found by 8% while making you 10% delirious. Paranoia increases the number of rare monsters in the map by 15% as well as makes you 12% delirious. Envy increases the amount of Waystones found in the area by 30% while making the player 15% delirious. Disgust will increase the precursor tablet drop rate by 30% and make you 18% delirious. Despair increases the stack size of Simulacrum Splinters found in the area by 30%, which we'll talk about in a moment, and makes the user 20% delirious. Fear gives rare monsters a 25% chance to have an additional modifier and makes the player 22% delirious. Suffering makes all boss monsters in the area have 1 extra modifier and the map 25% delirious. And finally, Isolation makes the map 50% delirious with no other benefits. As for what players in the area are X% delirious actually means, it's functionally a modifier on the map that causes the player to both do less damage and take more damage, increasing the challenge of the map as far as we're currently aware. This modifier also dramatically improves the drops of the enemies within the map in exchange for that extra challenge it presents. When a map is delirious, the rares within the map are also host to unique delirium modifiers, which manifest in the form of black demonic entities sprouting from their body, granting them temporary massive damage resistance during the cast, or as special on death effects. In both cases, these extra modifiers further improve the drops on your rares as well. Basically, distilling emotions into your maps is a great way to further juice up your Waystones for extra loot, monsters, and challenge. But be warned, delirious maps, when ran on an Atlas node with a Delirium Mirror, cancel out the mirror and nullify any distilled emotions that would have been awarded by it, functioning as an override of the mechanic. So if you're gearing up to play a Delirium Mirror node and wish to play out the mirror mechanic, do not use a Delirium map and instead insert a normal one. Now, what if you don't care to juice up a Waystone with an emotion and you also don't need it for your Amulet Anointment? If this is the case, you might as well sell them on the currency exchange for some extra cash. While Distilled Ire is as cheap as 1/3 of an Exalt, the rarer, more sought after emotions like Suffering and Isolation go for 78 Exalts and 2 Divines at the time of recording. Granted, they are very rare. Distilled emotions are definitely something that starts out extremely expensive at the beginning of a league as well, before slowly becoming more affordable due to how every endgame character wants to anoint a passive onto their amulet. So whenever the next league comes around, this is something you're also going to want to keep in mind. Alright, so far, Delirium doesn't seem all that profitable unless you're hitting big ticket emotions, and you'd be right to think that. But that's because once you begin doing level 75 or higher endgame mapping, Delirium demons begin to drop Simulacrum Splinters. These splinters are both dropped by the demons themselves and rewarded at the end of a Delirium Mirror encounter based on the number that would have dropped during the mechanic from the enemies, and are also dropped in greater quantities by the Delirium bosses Casus, the Revelation, and his best friend, Omniphobia Fear Manifest, who both randomly appear during any Delirium encounters. When you obtain 300 splinters, these can be utilized to enter the Simulacrum, the pinnacle encounter of the Delirium mechanic. Within the Simulacrum, you'll face off against 15 waves of Delirium demons in a very close quarters environment, while random Waystone modifiers are applied to the individual wave, as well as a stacking percentage of Delirium that scales all the way to 140%. Both Casus and Omniphobia will also make appearances throughout the waves before engaging you together at the same time in the final 3 waves. And to make all of this worse, the Delirium demons have temporary invulnerability when they first appear on the map, meaning they will typically get a bit too close before you actually get a chance to dispatch them. This all comes together to form what is, in my opinion, the most lethal and dangerous pinnacle encounter in the entire game at the moment. And with a simulacrum being worth 2.5 divine orbs, you want to make sure your character is well prepared for this challenge before attempting it. Anything less than a powerful, well-rounded endgame character with no significant Waystone weaknesses will feel challenged by this pinnacle encounter. Until you fit this criteria, you have one of two options when it comes to your splinters. You can either sell them for a handy profit, making an exalt every 1.3 splinters you take to the currency exchange, or you make some friends and attempt the simulacrum in co-op. Although co-op scales the difficulty of Path of Exile 2, having multiple players within the simulacrum means you'll have better surface area coverage with your ability spam, as well as a better uptime on ticking damage onto the enemies the moment they become active. Not to mention, this strategy allows you to cover each other on rounds where the modifiers are stacked against one of you, such as when the enemy has increased accuracy due to the wave modifier, greatly reducing the survivability of any evasion-based characters. In these kinds of scenarios, your ally can help pick up the slack while you play safe, as an example. Not to mention, at least in the case where the map owner survives and the ally dies, allies that fall in battle during the simulacrum can actually use the portals in your hideout to rejoin the fight. I did not personally test if this is still the case should the map owner be the one who is slain while the ally survives, as we didn't want to waste the simulacrum to finding out. But if you know the answer to how this scenario plays out, please leave it in the comments below for everyone. Completing simulacrums rewards large amounts of item level 82 plus gear to roll on for potential upgrades and profit, as well as an array of distilled emotions and currencies. Completing simulacrums also rewards one of Casus's unique item drops. Most of them are worthless, but the Melting Maelstrom unique mana flask, the only one of its kind at the moment, is valued at 20 Divine Orbs. And Megalomaniac Diamonds, which can drop when playing a Tier 4 difficulty simulacrum, can be extremely valuable depending on the skills they allocate, as this unique jewel, instead of granting standard benefits or stats, allocates random passives to your tree at the position of the jewel instead. The vast majority of these combinations will be basically worthless, however. Generally, most simulacrums that do not reward the flask or good distilled emotions will not break even on the value of the simulacrum to enter, but completing simulacrums of each difficulty level will reward Delirium Atlas points, which I will be covering in a bit, as the Delirium Atlas, when allocated properly, can multiply the benefits of incorporating this mechanic into our gameplay. But first, we're going to cover how to most efficiently incorporate Delirium as a whole into our mapping strategy. When you compare Delirium to focusing activities like Breach and Ritual, it's by far the least rewarding, but that doesn't mean it's useless. In fact, it's just as good, if not better to some degree. This is because you do not need a Delirium Mirror to profit from Delirium the way you need to create breaches or rituals through towers. We can add a Delirium map to any map node and get extra loot and experience from the monsters on top of the Simulacrum Splinters as an extra currency, making it the perfect way to supplement all of our other activities, including when we are just traversing the map, at the low cost of some distilled emotions. Normally in Path of Exile 2, your strategy on the Atlas map revolves around playing to towers and inserting precursor tablets to fill the nearby map nodes with mechanics and modifiers that are desirable to you. But this requires you to often traverse many nodes that have very little value. When using a Delirium Waystone for these traversal nodes, the rewards from a Delirium map stay relatively the same besides the precursor tablet modifiers, regardless of what mechanics are on the node. So adding these maps during traversal nodes generates us additional currencies and loot at no extra cost beyond the emotion used to instill them. When it comes to ritual farming, this mechanic benefits most from getting to a tower, hitting all the rituals, and moving on as quickly as possible. oftentimes having to clear the entire map to find all the rituals anyway. By adding a Delirious Waystone into our ritual farming, we not only generate more currency for our trouble while playing out the ritual, but also generate many more tribute points thanks to the additional Delirium demons, allowing us to more easily acquire high ticket items when they appear, creating a fantastic synergy as both mechanics are best utilized moving as quickly from map to map as possible. And it doesn't stop there either. When farming Breach optimally, we're creating webs of overlapping towers with strong precursor modifiers, meaning adding in a Waystone with Delirium allows us to benefit even more from the effort we spent stacking up those towers and tablets to farm Breach, as we spoke about in the previous guide. So, although we can add Delirium Mirrors into our maps utilizing Delirium tablets dropped within Delirium maps of all types, it's typically going to be far more beneficial to, instead of doing that, augment our other more profitable activities like Ritual and Breach with additional rewards from making our Waystones Delirious instead, and utilizing those towers to activate other mechanics. This makes Delirium not the best mechanic, but something always worth utilizing if the character is able to handle the additional difficulty added by it at all times while exploring the Atlas map, resulting in loads of splinters which can be used to fight the Simulacrum or exchanged for currency, as well as extra loot and currencies from the Delirium demons during just traversal or any other activity. Instilling our maps with all of these emotions to make them delirious is going to cost us some in the way of currency, considering we'll only be getting those distilled emotions from naturally spawned delirium mirrors rather from ones spawned when activating a tower. But this is not an issue for two reasons. One of which being that distilled ire and guilt are extremely cheap and very beneficial modifiers you'll always more than break even for utilizing. And two, because of our Delirium Atlas. Should your character be powerful enough to overcome the Simulacrum, this is how you can best distribute the points gained from it to more than double the efficiency of utilizing Delirium Waystones in your maps. Our first 2 points are spent on Get Out of My Head, which is going to make 20% of all Waystones drops within our maps come with randomly instilled emotions, and I do mean random. Sometimes your maps will drop with extremely expensive emotions like fear, suffering, or isolation, representing a lot of extra resources obtained for free. And even when they drop with lesser emotions, you're still benefiting from what is effectively free currency being invested into your maps for you. Only issue is, these emotions are not necessarily going to be instilled into the highest tier Waystones being dropped. The 20% can potentially get applied to the tier 1 Waystones that you've long ago filtered out, and reforging maps with instilled emotions will not maintain the emotion on the map on the higher tier Waystone. So in reality, you'll be getting less than 20% in the form of actually useful maps. We can, however, mitigate this by always making map nodes with bosses on them delirious, as bosses always drop several max tier Waystones, giving us the best opportunity to rake in some extra high tier delirium for our endeavors. And on top of that, next patch, they're going to be buffing the amount of boss nodes on the map and allowing us to create new boss nodes through precursor tablets, further improving this strategy. The real payoff, though, comes in when we spend our 4th point on Would You Like to See My Face? This will make it so all of your Simulacrum Splinter drops from non-boss encounters is doubled, and the delirium applied to your character grows in strength twice as fast when traversing a mirror encounter. The doubled Simulacrum Splinters results in loads of extra currency added into your maps, especially when using Waystones with item quantity modifiers. This passive, combined with our 6th point being spent on the mirrors, increases the number of fractured mirrors located within our maps by 50%, dramatically increasing the amount of splinters and overall loot we receive when playing delirious maps and mirrors. For the last 2 points, we take They're Coming to Get You, which pauses the delirium timer during mirror encounters by 4 seconds when slaying rares, and makes all delirium encounters 25% more likely to spawn the unique bosses for even more splinters and rewards. This all comes together for some fantastic additional currency per hour, which also synergizes and adds to other league mechanics that you'll be playing out at the same time. And that is just about everything there is to know about the Delirium mechanic and how to get the most out of it. If I failed to tell you anything of value and wasted your time, again, be sure to dislike the video. And if this video helped you out, you might as well like the video and subscribe to the channel for more guides like this one in the future, especially if you'd like to see a video covering Ritual next, which will be receiving a significant buff in the next patch. By liking the video, you'll let me know there is an interest in seeing more of these guides, so I'll begin work on the Ritual version if this one manages to make it to 2,000 likes. If you have any questions, I stream 3 times a week both on YouTube and Twitch, and am more than reachable in my community Discord linked below, where I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. If you're curious about what build I used in the footage for this video, I actually just released an updated guide on my Lightning Arrow Ranger build that I'll leave a link to below as well. Thank you to my coffee supporters who help keep the channel going, and thank you for watching till the end. I'll see you next time.
Believe me, you will fall, Exile.